Hi, everybody. It's Mark Rushton of MarkRushton.com. It is Saturday, January 8th, 2022. And this video is called Bad Contracts for Recording Artists Should Be a Thing of the Past. So I'm going to go through this article here by Mark Hogan in Pitchfork on Four Tet's streaming royalties dispute with Domino Records and why it matters. And I'm going to nitpick a few things. But let me just state right up front here, Four Tet's being screwed by his label. And the contract he signed didn't really anticipate the digital download, or much less the streaming era. And I believe that those kinds of contracts, the lawmakers should allow the renegotiation of those contracts. I don't think we're going to leap much further beyond digital. At least we're not going to change as much as we did from physical media to digital. I can't see where we can go beyond that. But who knows? But anytime there's some sort of major change like that, we shouldn't. We'll get into it. So I'm going to read through it here. In a series of emotional tweets on Sunday, November 21st, Kieran Hebden revealed that his former label Domino had pulled 3 of his albums from streaming services. If Hebden isn't necessarily a household name like Taylor Swift, whose pronouncements about the music industry tend to reverberate across the mainstream media, in part that's also why his dispute with Domino could be significant. Well, let me just stop right here. This whole second paragraph is just a disaster. This is the sort of garbage I've come to expect from music journalists. Taylor Swift, I remember when she was trashing Spotify, when she never, I don't have my music on Spotify because they don't pay artists fairly. So that's why I have my music on YouTube, which, not YouTube Music, but YouTube. You ask any artist, particularly an independent artist like me, who gets royalty statements, and YouTube pays a micro fraction compared to anything else. YouTube, the video service, a micro fraction. So I remember when this came out, and I was just like, she's full of crap. The mainstream, the music journalists are dumb. They just repeat absolutely everything some major artist says, whether or not it's actually the truth, whether there's any basis of truth in there or not. I know that makes me a target. Whatever. I don't care. Then she put her music on Spotify, and it just seemed like a big PR campaign. How many mansions does she own? I'm just curious. She's got all that time to re-record all of her early albums out of spite. Whatever. She has her fans. I kind of consider her a joke. Anyway, it gets worse. Four Tet's battle for a bigger slice of the streaming pie arrived as UK lawmakers were mounting a high-profile debate over the artist's share of music royalties. The streaming pie. The Four Tet's battle has nothing to do with the streaming pie. Four Tet's battle has everything to do with record contracts. It has nothing to do with the streaming pie. We'll get into it. A movement called the Broken Record Campaign asserted that streaming companies privileged a rarefied few at the expense of a larger, secure, professional class of artist, songwriter, and performer. In other words, artists who were extremely popular made more money than artists who were not popular. I know, it's not fair. So you can ignore that. That's as label revenues look set for record highs. The question of how to fairly divide the digital dollar has loomed large for the U.S. music industry. No, it has not loomed large for the U.S. music industry. It has only loomed large for music journalists who have a bone to pick. They want to go back to the good old days of vinyl or cassettes or whatever, CDs. Why can't I be able to buy a mansion with the crappy filler tracks on CDs. Who, those days are gone, man. Write a better hit song. What can I say? Enjoy your mansions. Obviously, we're all watching this case very closely, said Charlie Anderson, a UK based music litigation specialist who has worked with Daft Punk. That these issues are moving through the UK court right now couldn't be more timely. He said, sadly, like cases in the US that have come before, I think this one is likely to turn on contractual construction and therefore probably won't set any wider legal precedent than others can rely on. But it may just sway debate at a political or industry level. It should. Contractual construction. And we'll get into it. I hope it does, because I'll ramble about that at the time. Hebden filed a claim against Domino in London court in December 2020. The lawsuit focuses on the royalty rate that Domino owes for streams and digital downloads under Four Tet's 2001 record contract. Hebden claimed that the contract suggests a, quote, reasonable royalty rate for streams and downloads would be at least 50%. I would agree that a reasonable royalty rate for streams or downloads should be at least 50%. With a record label, I would say at least 70. But at least 50, I'm not even comfortable with that. And we'll get into that. Here's the part that should have been in the second paragraph when he was going on and about Taylor Swift and the unfairness of it all, because this is the real unfairness. Let me highlight it here, just for effect. Domino has instead been paying Hebden a rate of 18% on streams and downloads alike. Wow. 18%, to keep 82% of the money that he earns from when you buy a $1 download. You know, the company will kick out 70 cents. And out of that, he gets about 13, 14 cents. In streams, yeah, 18%. What does Domino have to do to earn their other 82%? Well, we'll talk about that. To arrive at the 50% figure, Four Tet's lawyer seized on contract provisions regarding international and flat fee use of Hebden's music. The deal reportedly says that Domino is obligated to pay out 50% of all royalties and fees received from licenses for music consumed outside the United Kingdom, as well as 50% of net proceeds generated by licensing recordings for a flat fee rather than a per record royalty. Hebden's lawyer contended that these clauses should have been applied to most of his streaming and download income. In bringing the lawsuit, Four Tet asked for damages up to $95,000 plus costs. Hebden also seeks a court judgment over the 50% royalty rate. If a judge determines that the contract doesn't cover streams or other digital formats, then Four Tet should have received a reasonable market rate for them, according to the musician's legal arguments. I agree. It should be higher than 50%, but that's whatever. As noted by UK music trade outlet Complete Music Update, the litigation fits into a long-running debate over whether digital formats represent a sale or a license under the terms of analog-era contracts. Lawsuits have been waged over this issue since the iTunes era. Yeah, there's a lot out there. And the ones that they cite here are just, like the Fleetwood Mac, the Allman Brothers, tons. Because these were bands that get screwed on CDs, and then they get screwed on downloads, and then they get further screwed on streaming. Four Tet's case wasn't visible until middle of last year, after Domino's February 2021 defense filing became public. Domino argued that Four Tet wasn't entitled to a 50% rate for streaming royalties. The label, I'm going to get into it here. The label reportedly pointed to another contractual provision that sets a rate for, quote, new technology formats that is 75% of the otherwise applicable rate. Domino argued that although it had paid Hebden an 18% rate for his digital catalog on a discretionary basis, it had only been obligated to pay a chunk of that. The label also reportedly asserted that the rate for streaming and downloads would be the same, contending that the stream is technically a download of data packets. Plus, Domino argued that streaming wasn't a mainstream distribution method at the time of the 2001 contract and wasn't being contemplated by either it or Hebden. All right, this whole thing here, this makes Domino look terrible, greedy, just crooked. Because what is 75% of 18%? It's 13.5%. We could have paid him just 13.5%. It would have been legal. So you're taking 80. You could have taken 86.5% of his earnings. Instead, he only took 82%. And what'd you have to do for that? What'd you have to do for that, Domino Records? Did you have to press vinyl and distribute it to record distributors and record stores and mail things out? Did you have to? No, you didn't have to do that. CDs? No, didn't have to make and press CDs, have them sitting somewhere. Storage? No, you didn't have that. All you had to do with iTunes or Spot or going out to streaming services, you go in and you upload some WAV files or whatever, and you put in the title and you put in the ISRC and you put in the publishing, and it takes about 15 minutes. It takes about 15, 20 minutes of work. Well, might want to double check that. That might take a half an hour. And then you click enter and it's gone. And then once it shows up on everywhere, you double check it. And I don't know how it works with distributors for independent labels, major. I don't know how that works. I don't know. There's probably a review process or something like that. It's not like you had to go spend a bunch of money on the artist. You had like a half an hour of time over something that you already had. And then this whole thing about the streaming wasn't a mainstream distribution method, and it wasn't being contemplated by Domino or Hebden. Maybe you should renegotiate. The whole new paradigm shift, maybe that should be renegotiated. Instead of just, hey, it's a new technology format. Let's pay them less. If there's ever a really good argument for not signing with a label, there you go. Right there. Right there. Right there. Nasty. 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 Terrible. It's the filthiest industry. They can't even reform. They can't even get their contracts reformed. You know why? Because, my gosh, I'm getting 82% off something somebody made 20 years ago because of a contract. Talk about screwing artists. Mark Hogan's worried about the pie and Taylor Swift. This stuff's going on all the time. All the time. And, it's time to clean this up. Again, bad contracts for recording artists should be a thing of the past. And then it goes on here and on here. Talked about Domino's lawyers had said that they would remove his music from all digital services in order to stop the case progressing. It's rude. We don't want to have to pay out more if we lose. That's all that is. Caribou's Dan Snaith, another former Domino signed electronic artist, voiced support for Hebden, tweeting that the album's removal was a desperate and vindictive act. That contract was pretty vindictive too. I'm right. I agree. I agree. Four Tet was motivated by setting a fair precedent for other artists in similar situations rather than his own self-interest. Well, hopefully. I don't think 50% is fair. I think it ought to. I think for a musician these days, I think 70 to 75% of streaming revenue should go to the artist from the label, from whatever the Spotify or Apple Music or KK Box or whoever pays Domino Records. Four Tet shouldn't be getting 13.5% or 18% or even 50%. Why? What's the justification for that? Well, we had to do blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then there's more here. Following the outcry, Domino said in a statement that it was just as saddened about the situation. It was not taken lightly, the decision to temporarily remove his albums from digital services. We were advised to do so as a necessary consequence of Hebden's litigation at the time. Oh my God. Can you imagine this? And then, of course, all this just weasel words here. Through all this, we have been and continue to be open to discussion and mediation. While we are equally as disheartened to have taken these steps, we remain hopeful that an amicable solution can be reached in the future. Our door is now and will always be open for further discussion with Hebden. So Hebden wanted 50% of his download and streaming income, and you wanted to pay him 18%. And really, we could have just paid you 13.5%. You should be happy. If 5% appears too small, be thankful I didn't take it all. They're not even the tax man. The dominoes are gonna fall. Is that the end of the article here? No, there's a little bit more here. And there's more going on here. And blah, 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 blah. Industry, industry, industry. What we need, and I hope at least in the UK, this gets legal reform going on, because when there is a new technology or is a new distribution method or something like that, the artist should be able to renegotiate that contract. There certainly should not be a step backwards in the royalty rate, particularly when the record company does not have to put up so much money. That's why I'm independent. So I'm not going to sign any. The only thing I'm signing are like the contracts to get onto systems. And I know what I'm signing. I'm reading them. But yeah, this is a very interesting case because the contract was signed before digital files were really a thing and long before streaming. So it's like all that language about new formats or new whatever, that's I think there was a mistake there. I think everything should have been and I think the lawmakers, which they'll never do this because who runs law? Lawyers, right? And then the lawyers for the record companies, they want to keep that money flowing forever. It just, they do. Oh, you're making that much money, and the artist may or may not have that much money for whatever reason because they weren't paid that much because it all went up their nose. It all went to ex-wives. It all went to lawyers to keep you out of prison for God knows what. You know, I don't know. So the artist, you know, often the artist doesn't have the money to mount this sort of a legal campaign, this sort of thing. You know, I don't know. I think about other cases out there because I've read a lot of music biographies over the years, and read a lot of interviews and things like that. There's a couple things that strike me. One is David Bowie in the Bowie bonds in the 1980s. You know, it was framed weird, but it was essentially he's buying back, he's paying off Tony DeFries for the bad contract he signed, getting the rights, getting the masters back on his early recordings, you know, things like that. And having control of somewhat of your musical legacy. And the other one was Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry had an interview in I think it was in the mid to late 1980s when the Hail Hail Rock and Roll movie was coming out. And he had signed bad contract when he first got started, being a musician, making records. And he later realized that, got out of that. And then after that, he kind of went the wrong way. He was all, you know, pay me my money up front, that sort of thing, which I understand. You've been burned. You sign bad contract. You get the money, right? But he had said he was very, he was like, yeah, those people took advantage of me and whatever, but I signed the contract. So, you know, I learned from that. I learned after they took advantage of me that I'm not going to let anybody take advantage of me in the future. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But you know, most musical biographies, you have this sort of stuff going on. Like Tommy James and the Shondells in bed with Morris Levy. Oh my God. And just everything else. Pink Floyd. Oh, we're going to fire Richard Wright. Then we're going to hire him back as a touring musician for wages. It's all weird. So weird. The Beatles. You think that, and all the other things. It's all the musicians that signed all those terrible deals back in the 90s. What was it? Semisonic, the drummer, had that. It was a good book. The drummer of Semisonic. I think they were like unrecouped forever. Just on that. You know, it's like the problem with music. The problem with maybe the problem with music. I'm gonna include a link of that in the description there. The problem with music. It's still happening today. It's largely because of these old contracts. As I like to say, be independent. You can do it. You can do it as an independent artist these days. So I like to say that the streaming services have democratized distribution. Look at what the rappers are doing. Pay attention to the rappers. They've figured this out many years ago after signing some really, 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 really bad contracts back in the early days. And then the whole sampling thing. But you look at so many of the rappers, man. They get their own companies and they license and they do it. They do it smart business stuff, man. Look at the rappers. Just don't. Well, but he also has his own brand of marijuana or vodka or something like that's different. Look at how they trying to keep as much of that dollar as they can. All right, so that's it. That's it for this one. I gonna rant every now and then. I don't know. I don't know anybody to rant with. I'm gonna rant with you here in the camera. So yeah, I hope things change. Sucks. It's gonna cost some money. May or may not win. And then you still got to deal with these people. unless you get a bunch of money and buy them off. But look at that attitude. Can you imagine what it would cost to buy your recordings back? Whew, not for me. I will remain independent. I think I'm being fairly compensated as an independent recording artist. Whatever. That's it. Talk to you later.